we were a little bit worried. We didn't know whether or not we were going to have a nice old crowd. And so first off, thank you all for coming out. South by Southwest has been around now for 30 years, and it has made a tremendous impact in a lot of different fields. And I think that it is a great opportunity for us to use this forum to gain greater attention for opportunities to impact the lives of numerous people. And before we get into that, I want to take a little bit step back and think in terms of history. And when you think about the development of humanity, we developed as makers, right? That is what made us make that transition from being animals to being people, was when we began to create tools. And for millennium, that is how we lived. We made things. If we needed to make a knife, then we took two rocks and banged them together and made them sharp. As time went on, we continued to make for ourselves, right? Until the Industrial Revolution, if you wanted a shirt, then you sewed yourself a shirt. If you wanted butter, then you churned the butter, right? People made their own tools, they repaired their own tools. And in just the last few centuries, we found ourselves becoming much more distant from the things that we make. We found ourselves distant from the making process. So this is true also in terms of the food that we eat, right? We're farther from our food, but we're also far from the things that we possess. Our clothing is made somewhere far away that we're not really a part of it. Who knows where all the parts of the cell phone are put together? We have become very distant from the process of making. But in just the last few decades, and really very much in the last few years, there has been a renaissance of making. And people have begun using the tools of the digital manufacturing revolution. Things like 3D printing and laser cutting, the ability to make something in Timbuktu and then share it in Tibet, the ability to reproduce the efforts of one person in one location and share them in another, has created an international community of makers. And as these makers begin to galvanize into communities and creating their own maker spaces, what has begun to also emerge is that the ability to radically customize products, the ability to make something which is not one of 5,000, but is one for one, has enabled technology and has enabled the making process to significantly impact the lives of people who need unique products. So, welcome. We are here today to talk about remaking the world, designing for disability. On the panel with me here are, from the end, Arie Meir. Arie is with Google.org. We have Michal Kabatznik, who is with Tom Global. And we have Kim Lathrop, who is with California Centers for Independent Living. So I'm just so excited to be here, and I'm going to stop talking because I'm just here to enable these people too. So I want to start with you, Arie, if I can. Could you share with us a little bit of insight onto Google.org's efforts regarding disabilities for the last year? I know that you guys have done a lot with it. Could you share with us about it?
So let me tell you a little bit about our team. So what we do in Google.org, we seek out social entrepreneurs that are using technology and trying to solve the world's biggest problems. And we do that in several ways. We support their vision and we help it scale and amplify. And we also mobilize and rally our employees and use their skills to help realize these projects, to help them come to fruition. And in the context of disabilities, we launched a program last year which focused to identify non-profit organizations that are using technology to help increase the level of independence and opportunities for people with disabilities. And in the context of this program, we have identified Tom, as our partners, and we're excited to share some of the work we've been doing in this context of this panel.
Okay. And what could you highlight a little bit more of some of the other things that y'all have done in the last year?
So I'll give an example maybe. So our goal was we created an open call, and we basically reached out into the world and asked what are some of the challenges that people with disabilities are facing, and how can technology help solve these challenges. And what was important for us is to identify solutions that are global, because different locations, different conditions in the world require different solutions, and also cover a wide range of disabilities to make sure that we address. So I'll give an example of a project we funded. Organization called Perkins School for the Blind is the same school that Helen Keller went to. And one of the challenges that they have identified is for visually impaired people, navigating is one of the big challenges. So for example, people who are using GPS, once you arrive almost to the final destination, you stop using your GPS because it kind of becomes useless, it's not precise enough. So at that point, you start looking around and finding that precise door, the entrance to the building, or the bus stop. When you're visually impaired, you cannot do that. You don't have that feedback. So the idea is how we can use crowdsourcing and collect audio clues to help visually impaired people navigate. So we support this project and we want to see it happening, but what we also do is we work with these grantees and we engage our employees to help share some of their skills. And let me give you a concrete example. When we learned more about the project, we realized, hey, Google has already developed a crowdsourced GPS. It's called Waze. So how can we use some of the insights in that product to inform some of the research and some of the development of this particular application?
Okay, great. So you were saying that Google.org identified a partner that they wanted to engage with, and that is Tom. Michal, could you share with us a little bit about Tom? What exactly is the Tom process?
Sure. So TOM stands for Tikkun Olam Makers, and what we do is we bring people with disabilities together with technology experts, makers, engineers, and together they create products that address real everyday challenges that many people with disabilities face. We've developed a really unique methodology for make-a-thons, marathons of making, where we bring together teams of the makers and what we call the need knowers, which are people living with disabilities themselves or people who have a really close identification with certain needs either through their professional or personal circumstances. And the teams work for 72 hours in a state-of-the-art makerspace that we put together with all of the tools needed for rapid prototyping and digital manufacturing, everything from 3D printers and laser cutters to saws, woodworking tools, needle and thread, glue stick, crayons, anything that someone would need for rapid prototyping. And at the end of the 72 hours, each team has a working proof of concept or prototype of a product that answers a challenge of their specific need knower. And we kind of focus on 3 different kinds of products. We'll give some examples. So one example is taking products that already exist and improving them. So for example, if you think about crutches and wheelchairs, the crutches and wheelchairs we use today, for the most part, aren't that different from the ones that were used in the 19th century. And it's absurd that there haven't been more developments in that field since. So at one of our events, a team took crutches and kind of created Bluetooth, a Bluetooth handset that goes with the crutches, enabling the user to answer the telephone. It can send biofeedback, really just improve the experience. Another team took a wheelchair and added pedals that move up and down, moving the person's body in the wheelchair and giving them some kind of physical therapy on the way. Another type of product that we do is a product that's just totally new and totally different. It doesn't exist yet. So a team at our Make-a-thon in Tel Aviv created a device that connects with a pair of eyeglasses that allows people who suffer from ALS or locked-in syndrome and communicate only through their eyes to have a portable device. Devices until now haven't been portable. And then the third example is taking products that already exist and making them more affordable and more accessible. So my example for that is a team at the Makeathon we did in Brazil created a device that translates websites into Braille. Now, devices like that exist, are been around, are on the market, but they usually market for several $1,000s, and the team in Brazil was able to create a product that could be marketed for under $1,000, making it more accessible to many other people. And since we got started about 18 months ago, we've had 7 Makeathons around the world, in Israel, in the US, in Canada, and in Brazil, including the one we did with Google in San Francisco last September. But I could talk about this for hours, and they say that a picture is worth 1,000 words, so an image, movie is worth probably even more than that. So I'll just like to share a short clip from our event with Google in September.
Putting our ideas together and making things that will actually help people. Not just with the intent of helping people, but like really helping people. Oh, there you go!
So you're famous. So Kim, could you, we touched on the idea a little bit before, this idea of a need knower, right? A person who has deep knowledge of the challenges. Could you share with us a little bit both how you heard about Tom and about your experience at the Makeathon?
I heard about Tom through my work. I work for a nonprofit organization called California Foundation for Independent Living Centers. And my experience with Tom was just, it totally changed my thinking. And it grabbed my attention just with the application process, because for the first time, they wanted to know what challenge I had, and then but the most important thing is they wanted to know what solution I had as well, and I've never been asked that before in my life. With assistive technology, it's, oh, well, here's a catalog and pick what set best suits you, and if it's not here, sorry. And this was something that they were asking me to create or to think of an idea, and then they were saying, we're here and we're going to make this idea for you. And it's just, and I was born with tetraamelia syndrome, which is the absence of all 4 limbs. So I've been disabled my whole entire life, and I've had assistive technology, but it's never worked 100%. It's always been a glitch, and because I am so rare, there's nothing. The assistive technology is overgeneralized. Manufacturing, it's all overgeneralized, and this was something they were coming to me and saying, we can custom make something. What can help you? And I've just never experienced that before, so it was amazing.
Great. How was it at the Makeathon itself for you? What was the environment like?
The environment is, I definitely felt like I was the center of the design process. It was so cool because, we came up with an idea. So a little bit about my project specifically, I came up with, it's called the Grabber. And at home I use mouth sticks to operate phones or light switches or things like that. But I don't have anything with a grabber at the end of it to, pick up items around the house. So that was something we thought we could work with. And so we, through trial and error, which is very important, we actually came up with a concept first on the second day, and to where I would open my mouth and have the grabber clamp down on the object. And then we found out that didn't work. And so because I was there though to fit it out and say, oh, you guys, this actually doesn't work, this hurts my mouth, they said, oh, well, let's swap it out, and when you clamp down on your teeth, then the gravel will clamp down on the object. So I think that is so important, because if I weren't there to help with the process, it would have just been made the way the makers, would think that was the right way, and then it loses that liability. So.
Right, the need for constant feedback and having the user being a part of the design process throughout. Arie, Kim talked about the idea how oftentimes assistive technology falls short of where it needs to be. And Google changes the world through technological innovation, right? That's what Google does. How do you see technology changing the world for people with disabilities? And why is it that perhaps Google might succeed where oftentimes we've seen pretty systemic failures?
It's a great question. I think I'll start with saying that we don't think that technology is the solution or the panacea. We hope it can be a part of a solution. So we learned, for example, during the reviewing the applications we have received. We received more than 1,000 applications. So I'm mentioning this number because it gave us a unique data set to understand what is required, what are the challenges. And we learned that assistive technology is an important part, plays an important role in lives of people with disabilities. But there are things that technology cannot necessarily address on its own. Because we have the tech foundation, this is one of the core competencies as a tech company, we thought this could be a good place to start. Now, I would mention that we don't believe that we have all the answers, so the data that we have, we try to incorporate it and map it into a set of projects that we support. But one of the things that we did, besides asking entrepreneurs to apply with proposals, is we reach out to the general public, even people that don't have necessarily a project idea, and we ask people to submit what we call what ifs. So what if? And essentially these are just new questions, because we believe that the process of innovation starts with new questions, and we hope that in reviewing and learning from these questions we can unravel a new direction that solutions might come from.
So, when in these makeathons and in these efforts, there's a lot of new technology which is being created, and this, of course, raises up the question of intellectual property, right? Who owns them? How does Tom, Michal, if you could share with us, how does Tom address the idea and the issue of intellectual property? Right? Because on the one hand, you want to make sure that it gets into people's hands, and on the other hand, you want to make sure that people's efforts aren't simply taken out from underneath them.
Sure, absolutely. It's one of the first questions we get asked usually. It's important to note that at Tom, we're not creating new technologies. We're not trying to be a tech company. We're not trying to, make new technological things. We're trying to use existing technologies in ways that are more applicable to social good, and using these technologies in new and different ways. And regarding IP, we are really committed to open source and Creative Commons license. So someone much more eloquent than I said, help one, help many. And that's really what we agree with. So all the teams that come and participate at the Tom Makeathon sign a waiver where they're agreeing that the prototypes that they create will be available online in open source through our online platform, which is currently in beta stages of development. And our idea really is to look and try and focus on addressing places where markets have failed. So Kim was saying before how she doesn't feel that her needs are addressed through traditional assistive technologies, and that's because in many cases, traditional market companies wouldn't see enough market value here to enter the fray. Not enough profit margin, things like that. And we really want to be in that area where they're ignoring it. So we believe that by addressing Kim's problems, and then having that design available online open source, we can address anyone around the world who suffers from Kim's same challenges, and they can use the same solution. So Tom Makeathons, the team prototypes are available online open source with simple files and instructions, and anyone around the world can really kind of log in, get the files, meet up with their local makerspace or design community, and print the solution for themselves.
It's amazing. So Kim, I'm curious. It's perhaps a little bit naive to expect that, okay, we bring everybody together, we surround them with tools, and now that you're gonna walk away in 3 days, 72 hours with an off-the-shelf level product. The Grabber seems like something that could make a great impact on your life. Where does the project stand right now?
The project stands, the Grabber has great life to it still, and a good future. I'm still in communication with all of my team members when we were at the Makeathon, and one of my team members, actually, his name's Alex Gett, and he is actually making the Grabber his senior project for his design school that he's in. So, and then another, the Grabber was presented at some talks with another team member that I had, Arnon, for Microsoft. So, yeah, the Grabber's not over. You guys definitely will see it someday. I guarantee it.
Which I think touches on the fact that the work which starts at Tom is tremendous, but it doesn't end with Tom. Michal, what happens with things outside of the Makeathon?
Sure. So it's definitely naive to say that in 72 hours you can develop a full-on, ready alpha stage product. That what we have coming out of Tom events are working prototypes and proofs of concept. But since we started 18 months ago, we've created over 100 prototypes at different Tom Makeathons around the world. And right now, we're kind of shifting our focus and saying, okay, we've created these prototypes, now we have to get them out to the end user. So we've launched a new arm of Tom, in addition to the Makeathons, called the Tom Innovation Challenges and Tom Developer Groups. And these are groups around the world, some who have attended Tom Makeathons and some who haven't, and they're working on continuing the development of these prototypes to alpha stage products together with the need knowers. And we're working with different technological companies in Israel whose workers are working on the projects as part of the company's CSR, people coming in and volunteering on their own time, design students, people who want to continue developing these products. But since so far we've become pretty good, I think I can say, at the stage of challenge to prototype, and right now we're shifting on to our next area, which is how do we master the prototype to product stage. And it's something we've just started in the last 2 months. So far it's going really well, and that's where our focus is going to be for the foreseeable future.
Okay. I have some bookend questions which I want to ask eventually, but if any of y'all would like to chirp in with any questions which are pressing on you, this is a great time, and if not, I can always ask some more. That's what I do best. Yes, please.
How do you select and find the participants for your Makeathons, both in the need knower side and in the designer side?
Sure, great question. So what we do is we put out a call, what we call a call for challenge and a call for talent, usually about 3 to 6 months before the Makeathon actually begins. And on the talent side, we try and just get the call out through local maker communities, design schools, engineering departments and universities, different connections that we have to get them to the most relevant people. And then on the call for challenges side, we submit them to local rehabilitation hospitals, needs institutions, schools, and get them to the relevant communities. And in every event we've done so far, we've always had 2 to 3 times more participants and challenges than we can accept. So there's always a very rigorous and oftentimes heart-wrenching screening process. And the way we screen the needs with 3 criteria. One is, does an affordable solution exist? And if it does, we send the person, links to that solution and we move forward. Do we think that an actual prototype can be created in 72 hours? We want to set up our teams to succeed. And 3 is there a need knower present with the team? So a lot of people will kind of submit ideas and send things in, that's wonderful, but we're really committed to working with the need knower and not for them. So we have to have a need knower present for the entire 72 hours, or at least most of it, because as Kim said, once the need knower is part of the design process, it totally changes. And you really see people working together. I could never imagine another scenario where you have a mechanical engineer, an industrial designer, a physical therapist, and a 10-year-old kid working together and creating something together. It's totally different thought process coming together, and it's really wonderful. And having that need knower as part of the team is super critical.
Please.
So this is great. I'm John Shull. I started Enable. We make 3D printed prosthetics using a process that in some ways is very much like what you do, but in other ways is very much not like what you do, and that we're a global online community of volunteers, mostly collaborating over the internet. One of the things I'm still trying to figure out, like you, is how we go from interesting and promising designs out towards what you call products. But I'm still wondering whether makeathons around the world or global communities around the world can, again, fill a niche that isn't viable for commercial products by harnessing this mass fabrication and mass customization capability that has sort of emerged from the emerging network. So when you talk about products, are you clear about how this is going to go, or are you also thinking about the possibility that we can mass fabricate where commercial fabrication isn't viable?
I think that there's definitely products that are created or devices created at TOM events that could be mass produced, but one of the areas, and if product, the teams also have the freedom to continue developing their products as they see fit, and if they get to mass production, then that'd be amazing. But one of the areas we're focusing on is not necessarily the area of the mass production, but more like the middle market. So needs like Kim's, which are not necessarily met by traditional assistive tech and maybe wouldn't be addressed, things that are a little more specific. That's kind of the niche that we're looking at, because as you said, there's so much unknown, and we've only been around about a year and a half, but we're moving forward, and of course are big fans of you guys.
So let me add to that. I have 2 concrete examples in mind from the last Makeathon. One was a device that helps people, in particular this particular individual that attended the Makeathon, to open heavy doors. And the device is a piece of plastic that was laser cut, and it just has the right shape that she can put this thing on the door handle, push the door, and then kind of push power through. Now this is something that requires very high level of customization just because it has to fit the range of motion of that particular individual. So this probably will not be mass produced. On the other end of the spectrum, I can bring up an example of a sensor that is used by wheelchair users in particular. And so one of the problems for people in wheelchairs is pressure sores. So because of lack of sensation, you don't know when to move so that the pressure is equally distributed. So the solution prototype in the Makeathon was a sensor that would basically measure pressure in different places and notify the user using mobile app when to shift their weight. So this is something that can be rather standardized in maybe like for different chairs, but you could see how that allows itself for more mass fabrication. So I think there is a spectrum there.
If I recall, I think that team called itself Smartass.
Very good.
That was the original name.
I don't know if they've rebranded. Yes, please.
Is there a website where some people would say, I have a need, can you tell me this product exists, or I'm building this rigid magnet material that can withstand this heat, that's so straight, so we can tap into the brain power out there?
It's a great question.
And I want to thank Arie in advance for making that happen.
So,
I'll take it first, Evan. So, one of the challenges for us as partners in this project was it's great, like creating prototypes is very important, but how do you get to the product? Like, how do you actually bring that thing, let's call it product, let's call it more high-level prototype, to the actual user? And one of the pieces that we would love to see Tom develop is something we think of as an open marketplace for assistive technology. Because right now, as Kim mentioned, assistive technology comes, there is a catalog. It can be online, but it's like basically a set of solutions that you kind of have to force yourself into one of them. And the customization is very low. So the open marketplace we envision to be something that would help bridge these gaps between the users with concrete needs and products that would be customized to their need. So I think this is part of the work, and Michal can elaborate more. Where does it stand now?
Yeah, so we are developing a website that will look like that. It will be online hopefully within the next 3 months. In the meantime, you can go to tomglobal.org and just submit questions. We're happy to connect. But one of the things that we're trying to do with the online platform is to really create an online home for a global community. So beyond coming in and getting the files for specific prototypes created at Tom Makeathons around the world, it should also be a gathering place for people to discuss. You can share your questions from Austin, and maybe someone in Nepal had the same problem and they answered it and they discussed it. And an online forum to kind of talk and discuss and submit questions, and that's the goal for that right now. Right now, we're happy to work on a case-by-case basis, but within the next 3 months, we should have an online platform that will make that process much more streamlined.
do we have any questions for Kim? I want to make sure we're getting all around the place. Yeah.
So as you told that you scheduled a makeathon in continuous 3 days, so 72 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you feel about continuous 3 days? So for instance, there might be another schedule like separate to the weekends, including the other weekdays or something like that. How do you feel?
So right now we're trying to keep it consecutive 72 hours, 3 days, just because there's an amazing momentum and energy that kind of builds and starts and gets going. But we're actually working with different groups around the world who want to bring Tom Makeathons to their community. And we've kind of taken that global and a social franchise model where we give people tools that allow them to bring Tom to their community and host their own Tom Makeathon. And there's general framework and general guidelines, but if some places are doing it 2.5 days, there's ways to look at it. We try and keep it 72 hours, but you can get it started. And actually, I should also just jump in here and say that we call it 72 hours, but that's really cheating a little bit because the process actually begins a month before. So once we've done our call for challenge and call for talent, and done the screening process, we gather everyone for an evening, which we call pre-Tom. And that happens usually a month before the Makeathon takes place. And that's where the teams are getting together for the first time. They're meeting each other, meeting their need knower, getting their challenge, and they're really starting to work. They begin planning and designing and discussing, and in that month between the pre-Tom and the Tom, some teams meet every week, some teams just have WhatsApp groups, some teams, are talking on and offline and getting started, but most of the teams come into the beginning of 72 hours with some kind of initial plan and idea. That oftentimes changes, but there's some base getting started on that.
There seems like a large increase of making. Do you ever find situations where instead of making, you find there needs to be increased regulations and standardization to have disability for people with disabilities?
I can test that. So let me try and address that. So as I mentioned, we don't think technology, making, developing, designing, doing all the technical stuff is the solution. It's only the part. So one of the things that Google.org is going to launch this year is a public awareness campaign that will aim to bring disability-related issues into the mainstream media focus. So this is a complementary effort. Now, what we're trying to do is basically use the reach that we have and engage the public and the different stakeholders in the dialogue, because this is how we believe a change would begin to happen. I hope that addresses some of it.
I'll just also one quick follow-up and then let Kim take a stab as well if you want. Google.org obviously has an enormous global platform, and we're thrilled that they're using it, for kind of raising awareness of these kinds of issues. And at Tom, we're doing it kind of on our own smaller micro level, which is, we're bringing people together from all different kinds of worlds. And for a lot of people on the making and the design side, this is the first time that they're ever really working with someone with a disability a lot of times, or really understanding that, well, your restaurant can be accessible with a ramp, but then if the bathroom's upstairs, are you really accessible? No. And that's something that we don't always think about. So we're trying to change minds and open people's eyes up a little bit at a time, and hopefully grow to a much larger, audience, which will have some change as well.
So I think a way of framing your question again is that, Kim, do you find that theoretically we have the Americans with Disability Act, right, which should regulate and make accessible the vast majority of places. Should. So what do you find is the actual reality?
The actual reality is that we still have a long way to go with the ADA, but it's missing, it's trial and error. I mean, there's some places where I go and it's just completely accessible and I'm blown away and and I'm very appreciative. And then there's some places that aren't, but the effort is there to well, how can we accommodate this? Like I went to Los Angeles one time and we wanted to have dinner at this place and they didn't have an accessible entrance, but they were in the back getting boards from their dumpster in the back because they really wanted. They were like, no, we're gonna get you in, and I just was like, okay, I think the effort and the intent is there, but we still have a long way to go as far as implementing all these regulations. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, please.
This is a question for all three of you. How broadly do you define disability? And this is both a practical question, but also, I guess, a philosophical question. The reason I ask is I work at the University of England, and I had a student who was on the spectrum and some quality of Asperger's syndrome. And what we had to do was, I worked with him, design a new system for him to take notes. Right? And it wasn't, we weren't inventing something new, but we were taking a system and making our math.
Yeah.
And one of the things I found at my university, and it's a good university, is that trying to expand that definition of what is disability between external, internal, and then kind of how exactly we look at it. I'm curious how you guys approach that. But I think this is a disability issue.
So we chose the easy way out. We just used the definition of World Health Organization. I think it's fundamental. It's a philosophical question. It's like, where does disability end and neurodiversity begins? Yeah. And it's like, so I wouldn't attempt to stab at that.
There's disability everywhere, though. We at my organization, it's called invisible disability. People have disabilities, but you can't see them. But just because someone has Asperger's doesn't mean it's any more or less than what me being limbless. So, but it's very diverse for sure. Yeah.
So, question for perhaps a two-part question for Michal and Kim. I guess, could you speak a bit about what you've learned about teaching human-centered design in the maker movement? Because I think that's one of the things that everybody's been excited about, making things, but there's a big leap to be taken to make things with meaning and meaning for others. And so I'd love to hear kind of what you've learned through developing your process about that. And then Kim, I'd love to hear about your experience, both kind of from the beginning through the event itself, and then after the Makeathon, and what what that experience was like, and how you interacted with the other participants.
Sure. So I'll get started and say that when we first started out, we weren't sure that the need to be present the entire time. They could kind of come and go, things like that. But then we found that having them in the room just changes everything. And people tend to design, and I'm not a designer, I work with this stuff all the time, but people, when they're designing usually for some kind of end user who exists out there in the ether, or they have a very, clean-cut written profile on their end user, but the human element makes all the difference. So like Kim said, her team thought they had a grabber, that worked, it was awesome, and only when Kim began using it, it hurt her mouth. And that makes it completely unusable, but they would have never known that without the end user there. So we find that it totally changes how our designers are thinking and how they're working, and even on the engineering side, because someone says, I hold the walker like this and not like this, and when I lean back, this happens. And there's so many things that the user can tell you and information that you can get that you would never get otherwise. So for us, it's imperative. People, if they don't get it at first, after the first few meetings, they're blown away by how important it is, and they wondered, people said to me, how can I design now without the person next to me? I need to have that input now. It changes how you have designers think.
For me, too, what I really liked is, as Michal has mentioned earlier, that we were able to meet with our teams, digitally over, email and chats and stuff months prior. So it's like when I arrived there, I already knew my people, I knew my team, I was ready to go, and we were ready to work. And like I mentioned earlier, it just was so nice to be, I was asked, how does this fit for you, and how does this feel? Normally I'm trying to pitch ideas to someone else, and they're just like, oh, well, we don't have that. So I don't know. It was just really nice to be, and I was completely in the center of the process.
Mm-hmm. And I think you also shared that since Tom, you've thought more actively about designing for yourself, as opposed to just what's out there. That it kind of opened up your mind to being a maker yourself.
Yeah, like for example, the location that of the Makeathon I attended was in San Francisco, California, and it was at this tech shop. But it was like a 4-story tech shop that's like open 24/7, and it was the coolest thing I had ever seen. And so even knowing, I left Tom even thinking, well, now that tech shop is there, and I can go to this tech shop whenever I want to alter, an assistive technology that I have that doesn't quite fit. I knew that location was there, but I also built really great relationships. I have an amazing team, and then these 3 lovely people with me. We're like family now, so it just, the relationships too are so important, I believe.
I just want to add one more thing, if I may. One of the ways we also get our teams to focus on the kind of human-centered aspect of the design is we frame everything as the challenge. We tell our teams, well, this is Kim. Kim's unable to reach anything that's out of her mouse reach. That's the challenge. That's what you get. And we really, really, really try and always, we say, fall in love with the problem, not the solution, because a lot of times we'll get thinking of ideas and we could do that, no, but that wouldn't work. And half the time the team ends up going a completely different direction we never would have thought of, and it's just amazing. So by giving them the challenge and saying, go, that's what you have, the creative juices are flowing and you get completely different things that we normally expect. That also is a big part of it as well.
And I'll add one more learning element. So I had a chat with one of the designers who worked on a solution that allowed the individual to transfer from one wheelchair to another, because she was using one wheelchair outdoors and another in her house. And one of the things that was challenging for us to support this project is like we try to ask ourselves the scale. How do you bring this like physical congregation of people? This is not scalable, in any way that we like to think of scale, like billions. But we saw value in that because when I chatted to the designer, he mentioned that it was very important to be in the physical space for over prolonged amount of time, because, for example, even when you have this what we call tight user feedback loop, when you like do something, show the user, like show me how you use it. At first, the user in this case, there is always that kind of, they're designing for me. I will want to please them. So maybe they kind of they scale their ability higher than they can actually perform. So, for example, the strength that was required from this user was in reality smaller than she exhibited in the beginning. So having her there for a prolonged amount of time was actually super useful. And also like this rapport, the relationship was built, so she was more comfortable sharing, hey, this is not something I'm comfortable doing over time. While if you do this test once or twice, you might get the perception that maybe this will work.
Please.
I have questions.
Is it mainly about hardware solutions, complete products, or are you looking for software powered products? That's the first one. And I mean, also solutions that are less physical. And the second one is about what the name stands for, which is Tikkun Olam. I would like to hear about it. I mean, what's behind that? That seems like kind of interesting and different.
Sure. So we've discussed some of the more hardware-based products, and you've seen the hardware-based products more in pictures for the simple fact that hardware is a better photograph. If I can just be perfectly frank, but there's lots of software situations people are developing, or a lot of projects that kind of integrate software and hardware. So, for example, we had a team work on creating a new kind of autism communication board that allows people interacting with, through an iPad and tablet apps and adjustable, customizable per situation, and teaching new ways for people with autism to communicate. And there's a whole host of other software projects that I can give you, but the most frank answer is that, someone working hardware is a better picture than someone programming. But there's lots of software solutions. And then Tikkun Olam makers. So Tikkun Olam literally translates to repairing the world in Hebrew. We are based in Israel. And Tikkun Olam is it's a Jewish custom that basically tells us that we're responsible for fixing the world and leaving the world a better place than we found it. And that's something that we kind of really relate to. It's something that kind of always drives us. It keeps us going. That's how we kind of fit that in. And Tom was a nice, it's worked out really well. But that's really the driving ethos behind what we do.
Yes, please.
So it seems like your Makeathon sessions have been appropriately focused around individual need knowers and getting their immediate feedback. But as part of improving the world, obviously it's wonderful if you can take what you have found for an individual and see if you can scale that up for other individuals with similar needs or almost similar needs. Have you been able to scale up any of the products that have come out of the Makeathons to a wider acceptance yet?
Sure, yeah. So, what did you want to?
I said that's a good question.
Oh, yeah, it's an excellent question. So we're working on it, and things have been growing and developing. There was, so far, a few products that have kind of grown and been getting out there. The glasses that I mentioned that have the communication with through the eyes for the locked-in syndrome, they've kind of started going into limited production. They raised 150% of their goal through an Indiegogo campaign, and that's moving them forward really quickly. They're working through a nonprofit called Prize for Life, which focuses on creating solutions and that address needs of people living with ALS. They're based both in Israel and abroad, and they're kind of getting that out to a more widespread international audience. We've actually gotten people coming to us and asking for different kinds of products created at Tom events, and we're working right now on a case-by-case basis. But the idea is that once the web platform is up and running, we'll be able to address those kinds of issues from all over the world and connect them to the appropriate solutions.
So we are getting closer to the end. We're not quite there. I wanted to ask you, Arie, scaling up sustainability are oftentimes phrases that are thrown around, especially they're thrown around, period, but especially in the nonprofit world. But in particular in the nonprofit world, there are real challenges of sustainability. And many really well-intentioned and even effective nonprofits, long-term, aren't able to sustain themselves. So what is Google's approach to assuring sustainability?
Right. So we challenge our applicants to think about sustainability and scale from the very get-go. Sometimes we iterate. So I'll share a little bit about the application process, how we ended up working with Tom or other partners. Many applications, if you apply for funding, you need to submit an application maybe 50 or 100 pages long, everything you're going to be doing. Our application is like 1 page long because we don't believe that you can figure out all the details from the get-go. But that one page is not something that we can make a decision on. We basically review it, and there is interest, we start iterating, and we talk to the entrepreneurs, and we're trying to push them in all kinds of direction. And we like to think that we shape the projects that we eventually end up supporting. And in this context, one of the things that we look for is like, how is this project going to be sustainable after Google leaves the initial stage? Because we like to think that we're a part of it for the first period, but then how are you going to continue? How are you going to create value for your customers? So in that sense, we approach things not unlike venture capitalists approach startups. And that's one way to think. Like, we look for nonprofits in a way that Google Ventures looks for startups. So we are focused on mission, but we're looking for similar elements. How are you going to capture value? How are you going to scale?
So, just follow up on that. First of all, if you think that one page is easier than 150, you'd be wrong. It's incredibly challenging. But I think working with Google for us has been a huge blessing on many levels, but it mostly made us slow down and focus. We had been around about a year when we first were in touch with Google, and we had been going from Makeathon to Makeathon to Makeathon, working at a breakneck pace and just moving incredibly fast and just going from event to event to event. And working with Google and the whole process really forced us, thankfully, to slow down and stop and say, okay, these events are wonderful, but at the time we were a team of 4, now we're a team of 7. This is not sustainable. This is not going to go anywhere. We're just going to wear ourselves out. It's going to just implode at the end. So working with Google really allowed us to kind of stop, slow down, and think, okay, how do we want this to continue going for the next, 2, 5, 10 years? How are we going to scale it up? And working together with Google is how we got the ideas for the online platform, and how we got the ideas for another element of our program, which is called Makeathon in a Box. And that is really a toolkit that we're designing right now to work with different groups around the world who want to bring Tom Makeathons to their communities. So about 8 months ago now, we made a decision that we are no longer our core team is going to facilitate 1, maybe 2 events, 2 Makeathons each year. And we're going to allow people around the world to do their own Makeathons. We've gotten people coming to us from all different places, and we really realized that, it's to no one's benefit for us to do the event. I don't know the maker community or the niche community in Barcelona. I don't speak Spanish. What kind of successful event could I put on there? But a team from Barcelona, from the Fab Lab, and from the local university can put on an amazing event because they know their ecosystem. So since we've decided that, we've got around 15 different teams literally around the world who are working on different levels of developing Makeathons in their communities. And it's really exciting. And it's exciting to see this kind of thing that we've grown from a small little thing, one event, one time. This was supposed to be a one-time event when we first did it. It's supposed to be a one-time Makeathon, and it kind of grew into this whole organization. So it's incredible to see it kind of growing and the mission spreading and people really responding.
So, was there implicit in your answer there also so how do I bring this to Austin?
Yeah, I was gonna save that for my wrap up, but
okay.
Austin's a great community for a Tom event. You have all of the elements here with the strong tech shop and the maker and creative community and UT, and there's totally ways to bring it to Austin. And the way I would say it is to just be in touch. That's our website there. I'm happy to talk to anyone, give out cards. For Austin and anywhere else, it's a process that takes usually between 3 to 6 months. The budgets vary, but we've had Tom events. Our biggest one had a budget of, I think, $250,000. Our smallest one had a budget of $10,000. So it really varies, it really changes, and happy to work with groups anywhere on all levels to kind of make it happen in their communities.
Okay. Before we wrap up, I think that there's something beautiful about what this does in bringing together 2 communities, the community of makers and a community of people with disabilities, or like I like to call them, people, and creating something which is beyond simply the timescale of a make-a-thon. If Kim, could you speak for a little bit about what it means for you to be a part of this community?
Oh, I just feel touched. I'm so proud to be a part of it and be connected with everyone and my team. I'm sorry.
So we are still here. We're not going to rush out, and so we're happy to continue to talk about it. Like Michal said, if you haven't been to the tech shop, is anybody from tech shop here? I know that they're downstairs. So the tech shop up in Round Rock is a fantastic facility, and it is ready to go. And they are very eager to do a TOM here in Austin. So I would like to share the opportunity or the challenge that Michal, I think, put it well, that it's at the end of the day, it doesn't make sense for Tom to fly in from Israel and facilitate this here. Because if the idea is trying to galvanize the Austin community to do ongoing activity, then it needs to be done by the Austin community. So I would personally love to see that the next time that we're gathering at South by Southwest is to talk about, look at the amazing event and the amazing community which has been activated here in Austin, bringing together makers, bringing together need knowers, and empowering people in their lives. So thank you very much for coming out. We look forward to seeing what it is that you're going to make. Have a great day.